My name is Margaret, and I'm 58 years old. For 28 years, I raised my son Kevin alone after his father walked out on us. I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like until the day Kevin called to tell me there was no seat for me at his wedding. I just smiled, said I understood, got in my car, and drove home. But what I did during those next 48 hours changed everything. 2 days later, my phone showed 20 missed calls from Kevin. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to find out exactly what a determined mother can accomplish in just 2 days when her heart gets broken by the person she loves most. You know, people always say that being a single mother is the hardest job in the world, but I never really understood what that meant until I was living it. When Harold walked out on Kevin and me, my boy was only 6 years old. One Tuesday morning, Harold kissed us both goodbye like any other day, and by Thursday evening, I found a note on the kitchen counter saying he needed to find himself and couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. I remember staring at that note for what felt like hours, Kevin's little voice calling from the living room, asking when Daddy was coming home. I folded that piece of paper, put it in my jewelry box, and decided right then that Kevin would never feel abandoned again. I was going to be everything he needed. The years that followed were a blur of 18-hour days and endless sacrifice. I worked the morning shift at Mel's Diner downtown, serving coffee and eggs to truckers and construction workers from 5 in the morning until noon. Then I'd rush home to get Kevin from school, help him with homework, make dinner, and after he went to bed, I'd sit at our kitchen table doing bookkeeping for 3 different small businesses until 2 in the morning. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, but seeing Kevin's face light up when I showed up to his Little League games made every exhausted moment worth it. I'll never forget the day he hit his first home run. He rounded those bases and pointed straight at me in the stands. That moment right there made all the sacrifices feel like nothing. When Kevin needed new cleats for baseball, I sold my engagement ring without hesitation. When his class was going on a field trip to Washington, D.C., and I didn't have the money, I picked up extra shifts for 2 weeks straight, living on nothing but coffee and determination. Every school supply, every birthday party gift, every new outfit for picture day came from me stretching every dollar until it screamed. I drove that same beat-up Honda Civic for 15 years, watching other parents pick up their kids in shiny new SUVs, while I prayed my car would start each morning. But you know what? I was saving every penny I could for Kevin's college fund. I opened that savings account when he was 7, and I put something in it every single week, even if it was just $5. The college years were the hardest financially, but the proudest emotionally. I took out loans I'm still paying off today, worked overtime constantly, and ate ramen noodles for dinner more nights than I care to count. But when Kevin walked across that stage in his cap and gown, holding that business degree, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. After graduation, our relationship only grew stronger. Every Sunday, Kevin would come over for dinner. We'd cook together, talk about his job at the marketing firm, his dreams of starting his own business someday. He'd call me 3 times a week just to check in, ask for advice about everything from job interviews to which tie to wear to important meetings. He was my best friend, my greatest accomplishment, my whole world. Everything started to change 2 years ago when Kevin brought home a girl named Stephanie. I was thrilled, honestly. My boy was 26 then, and I'd been wondering when he'd find someone special. I remember the Sunday afternoon he called to ask if he could bring someone to dinner. I spent the entire morning preparing Kevin's favorite meal pot roast with all the fixings. I cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, bought fresh flowers for the table, and even wore my nicest dress. When they walked through the door, Kevin was beaming, and Stephanie was beautiful. I'll give her that. Tall, blonde, perfectly put together in a way that made me suddenly aware of my worn furniture and secondhand decorations. Stephanie was polite enough during that first dinner, but there was something cold about her smile. She barely touched the food I'd spent hours preparing, and when I asked about her family or her job, her answers were short and dismissive. Kevin, on the other hand, was more animated than I'd seen him in years, hanging on her every word like she was reciting poetry. Over the next few months, I started noticing changes in Kevin. Our Sunday dinners became every other Sunday, then once a month. When I'd call during the week, our conversations grew shorter. He'd say he had to go because Stephanie was waiting, or they had plans, or she needed him for something. I tried to include Stephanie in our traditions. I invited her shopping for Kevin's birthday present, thinking we could bond over finding him something special. She declined, saying she already knew what she was getting him. I offered to teach her how to make Kevin's favorite chocolate chip cookies, the recipe his grandmother had passed down to me. She laughed and said she didn't really do baking. When Thanksgiving came around, I spent days preparing Kevin's favorite meal, just like I had every year since he was little. 2 hours before dinner, Kevin called to say they'd decided to go to Stephanie's parents' house instead. Her mother had insisted, he said, and it was important to make a good impression with her family. Christmas was even worse. Kevin came by for an hour on Christmas morning, but he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. When I gave him the expensive watch I'd been saving up for all year, he thanked me quickly and said they needed to leave for Stephanie's family gathering. I watched from my window as they loaded his car with presents, none of which had been opened at my house. I started to feel like I was losing my son, piece by piece. The boy who used to call me for advice about everything now made major decisions without even mentioning them to me. When he got promoted at work, I heard about it from Janet, my sister, who'd seen it on his Facebook page. When he and Stephanie moved in together, I found out when I went to his old apartment and discovered new tenants. The engagement announcement was the final blow to my heart. I was scrolling through Facebook on a quiet Tuesday evening when I saw the picture Kevin down on one knee in some fancy restaurant, Stephanie showing off a diamond ring that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. 63 likes and 37 comments from friends and family members, all congratulating them on their happy news. I sat staring at that screen for 20 minutes, waiting for my phone to ring, expecting Kevin to call and share his exciting news with his mother. But the call never came. Instead, I had to comment on the post like everyone else. "Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you both." When Kevin finally called 3 days later, he was apologetic, but not really sorry. He said things had happened so fast, and they were just so excited, and he'd meant to call me right away. I told him I understood that I was thrilled for them both, but inside my heart was breaking a little more. I offered to help with wedding planning, thinking this might be my chance to reconnect with my son and maybe build a relationship with Stephanie. I suggested we could go dress shopping together, or maybe I could help with the invitations. Kevin said Stephanie had everything under control, that her mother was really involved in the planning, and they didn't want too many people getting in the way. For months, I waited to be included in anything related to my son's wedding. I'd ask Kevin how the planning was going, and he'd give me vague updates. The venue was booked, the dress was ordered, the caterer was chosen. When I asked if there was anything I could do to help, he'd say they'd let me know. I should have seen the signs, should have realized that I was being pushed further and further out of the most important day of my son's life. But I kept hoping that things would change, that Kevin would remember how much I meant to him, that Stephanie would warm up to me eventually. Tuesday evening, March 15th. I'll never forget that date as long as I live. I was in my kitchen seasoning a beautiful pot roast for our weekly dinner. Kevin hadn't been over in 3 weeks, always having excuses about wedding planning and being busy, but he'd promised to come this Tuesday. I'd spent the whole day making all his favorites: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and apple pie for dessert. I was humming while I cooked, actually feeling hopeful for the first time in months. Maybe this dinner would be like old times. Maybe we could talk about the wedding, and I could finally feel like I was part of this important chapter in his life. I'd even bought a bottle of wine to celebrate, thinking we could toast to his upcoming marriage. The phone rang at exactly 6:30, just as I was pulling the roast out of the oven. Kevin's name appeared on the caller ID, and I answered with a smile in my voice. "Perfect timing, honey. Dinner's just ready." "Mom, I can't make it tonight." His voice sounded strained, nervous, in a way that immediately put me on edge. "Is everything okay? Are you sick?" "No, I'm fine. It's just, well, Stephanie and I need to talk to you about something, and I thought it would be better to do it over the phone." I turned off the oven and sat down at my kitchen table, suddenly feeling like I needed to be sitting for whatever was coming next. "What is it, Kevin?" There was a long pause, and I could hear Stephanie's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "Mom, the thing is, the wedding venue is smaller than we originally thought. And Stephanie's family is really large, and with all their friends and our college friends and the people from work." My heart started pounding. I knew where this was going, but I couldn't quite believe it. "Kevin, what are you trying to tell me?" "There's just not enough room for everyone we want to invite. We've had to make some really tough decisions about the guest list." "Tough decisions?" "Yeah, and we've decided that it's going to be a really small, intimate ceremony. Just immediate family and a few close friends." I felt like I was floating outside my body watching this conversation happen to someone else. "I am immediate family, Kevin. I'm your mother." Another long pause. "I know, Mom, and this is really hard for me to say, but there's just not a seat for you at the wedding." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped and had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. "There's not a seat for me at my son's wedding. Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is. It's just one day. We can celebrate together afterwards, just the three of us. We can have our own little party." "Kevin, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Is your father invited to this wedding?" Silence. "Kevin." "Yes, he is. The man who walked out on us when you were 6 years old gets a seat at your wedding, but the woman who raised you alone doesn't." "Mom, it's complicated. Harold is paying for our honeymoon, and Stephanie's parents insisted that both sets of parents should be there." "Both sets of parents." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I see. So I don't qualify as a parent because I can't write a check for your honeymoon." "That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about, Kevin? Help me understand how the woman who worked 2 jobs to put you through college, who never missed a baseball game, who sacrificed everything for 28 years, doesn't deserve a seat at your wedding." I could hear Stephanie's voice again in the background, more urgent this time. "Mom, Stephanie's family has very specific traditions about weddings, and they're paying for most of it, so we have to respect their wishes." "Their wishes? What about my wishes, Kevin? What about my feelings? I know this hurts, and I'm sorry, but it's just one day. Our relationship is more important than one single day." I sat there in my kitchen looking at the pot roast I'd made with so much love, the table set for 2, the wine I'd bought to celebrate my son's happiness. 28 years of devotion had led to this moment, my son telling me I wasn't important enough to witness the most significant day of his life. "You're right, Kevin," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Our relationship is more important than one day. I understand." "Really? You're not angry?" "No, sweetheart, I'm not angry. I understand perfectly." "Oh, Mom, thank you so much. I knew you'd get it. We'll plan something special afterwards just for us." "That sounds lovely, Kevin. I hope you have a beautiful wedding." "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, son." I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet kitchen, staring at the meal I'd prepared with such hope and excitement. The silence was deafening. For the first time in 28 years, I felt completely and utterly alone. I wrapped up the pot roast, put it in the refrigerator, and poured the wine down the sink. Then I got in my car and drove home in a daze, my mind strangely blank. It wasn't until I was getting ready for bed that the full weight of what had happened finally hit me. My son, the boy I'd devoted my entire adult life to raising, had just told me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. But his father, who'd contributed nothing but financial support for a honeymoon, would be there to walk him down the aisle and dance at the reception. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something I'd never experienced before, a cold, calculating anger that was somehow more powerful than the raw emotion I'd expected. I called in sick to work Wednesday morning, something I'd done maybe 5 times in my entire career. But I needed this day to think, to process what had happened, and to figure out what I was going to do about it. I made a pot of coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down everything I could remember about Kevin's life, our relationship, and the financial support I'd provided over the years. As I wrote, I began to realize just how much power I actually had in this situation. The car Kevin drove, a reliable Honda Accord he'd bought 2 years ago, required a co-signer because his credit wasn't established enough for the loan. I was that co-signer. His condo, the one he was so proud of owning, had required a $20,000 down payment that he didn't have. I'd given him that money as a graduation present, calling it an investment in his future. His apartment lease before the condo purchase had listed me as an emergency contact and secondary responsible party. His credit cards, his student loans, his entire financial foundation had my name attached to it in some way because I'd been helping him build his adult life step by step. I opened my laptop and started making phone calls. First, I called Kevin's bank and confirmed that I was indeed the co-signer on his car loan. Then I contacted the property management company for his condo building and verified that I was listed as an emergency contact and that they had my financial information on file from when I'd helped him with the down payment. But the most interesting discovery came when I decided to dig deeper into this wedding that apparently had no room for me. I called information and got the number for Hillcrest Country Club, the venue Kevin had mentioned in passing during one of our brief conversations. Hillcrest Country Club, this is Amanda speaking. Hi, Amanda. I'm calling about the Mitchell wedding scheduled for next month. I'm Kevin's mother and I need to verify some details. Oh, Mrs. Mitchell, how wonderful to hear from you. We've been working with your son and his fiancée for months now. They're such a lovely couple. Thank you. I was wondering if you could tell me about the payment arrangements for the reception. Of course. As you know, we required a deposit when they booked, and then we have the final payment due 2 weeks before the event. Your son provided your contact information as the financial guarantor, so we have all your details on file. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You're listed as the financial guarantor for the reception. Your credit card information is what we have for the final payment. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Kevin had listed me as the financial guarantor for his wedding reception. The wedding I wasn't invited to. I was going to pay for a party I couldn't attend. With shaking hands, I called Bella's Florist, the shop I'd noticed charged on my credit card statement last month. I'd assumed it was something Kevin had ordered for Stephanie's birthday. Bella's Florist, this is Maria. Hi, Maria. This is Margaret Mitchell. I believe you're doing the flowers for my son Kevin's wedding. Mrs. Mitchell. Yes, we are. The arrangements are going to be absolutely gorgeous. Your son has excellent taste, and we're so grateful you're taking care of the payment for us. The payment. Yes, when your son placed the order, he explained that you'd be handling all the floral expenses as your gift to the couple. We have your card on file for the final payment next week. I was starting to feel dizzy. I called the photographer Kevin had mentioned, a woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in wedding photography. Sarah Chen Photography. Hi, this is Margaret Mitchell. You're photographing my son Kevin's wedding next month. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so excited about Kevin's wedding. He told me so much about you when he booked the session. He said you insisted on paying for the photography as a surprise wedding gift because you wanted to make sure they had beautiful memories of their special day. He said I insisted. Yes, he was so sweet about it. He said his mother always put his happiness first, and this was something you really wanted to do for them. The deposit you paid last month was very generous. I hung up and immediately checked my credit card statements online. There it was, a $1,500 payment to Sarah Chen Photography that I'd somehow missed among my monthly expenses. The picture was becoming crystal clear. Kevin had been using my name and credit for wedding expenses without telling me, while simultaneously planning to exclude me from the actual event. I was financially responsible for a wedding I'd been told I couldn't attend. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. I called the church where the ceremony was being held, St. Mary's Catholic Church, where I'd been a member for over 30 years. St. Mary's, this is Father Williams. Father, it's Margaret Mitchell. Margaret, how are you, dear? I've been meaning to call you about Kevin's wedding. I have to say I was quite surprised when I didn't see your name on the guest list he provided. You were surprised? Well, yes. Kevin is such a devoted son, and everyone knows how close you two are. When I asked him about it, he said there had been some kind of misunderstanding, but that you'd be there, of course. I just assumed he'd forgotten to add your name to the official list. My hands were shaking now. Father, what exactly did Kevin tell you about me and the wedding? He said you were so excited about him getting married that you'd insisted on helping with all the arrangements. He mentioned that you were taking care of several of the vendors and that planning this wedding was bringing you and Stephanie closer together. I felt sick to my stomach. Kevin had been lying to everyone using my reputation and my financial resources while planning to humiliate me in the most public way possible. "Father, I need to tell you something, and I hope you'll keep this confidential for now." I explained the entire situation, the phone call, the lack of invitation, the discovery that I was financially responsible for a wedding I'd been told I couldn't attend. Father Williams was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Margaret, I've been performing weddings for 35 years, and I've never heard anything like this. I'm not sure I can, in good conscience, perform a ceremony under these circumstances." "What do you mean?" "Marriage is about honor, respect, and family. What Kevin is doing to you goes against everything I believe about those values. I think I need to have a serious conversation with your son before this wedding proceeds." That evening, I sat in my living room with all the information I'd gathered spread out on my coffee table. Credit card statements, phone numbers, contracts, and a growing understanding of just how much control I actually had over this wedding that apparently had no place for me. For 28 years, I'd been Kevin's safety net, his support system, his financial backup plan. Even now, as an adult planning his own wedding, he was still depending on me to make his dreams come true. But somehow in his mind, that dependence didn't translate to respect or inclusion. I thought about Harold, Kevin's father, who would be sitting in the front row of the church while I sat at home. Harold, who'd contributed a honeymoon package, but no emotional support, no daily sacrifice, no unconditional love for over 2 decades. As I sat there in the quiet of my living room, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was being replaced by something else, a determination to teach my son a lesson about respect, consequences, and the true meaning of family. I had work to do. Thursday morning dawned clear and cold, and I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I made myself a strong cup of coffee, sat down at my kitchen table with my phone and notebook, and began making the calls that would change everything. My first call was to Hillcrest Country Club. "Good morning, Amanda. This is Margaret Mitchell calling about the Mitchell wedding reception." "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. What can I help you with today?" "I need to discuss the payment arrangements. As you know, I'm listed as the financial guarantor for the event." "Yes, and we so appreciate that. The final payment is due in 10 days. "That's actually why I'm calling. Due to some unexpected family circumstances, I need to withdraw my financial guarantee for the event." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. Could you clarify what you mean?" "I mean that I will no longer be responsible for any payments related to this wedding reception. You'll need to arrange payment directly with my son or find another guarantor." "But Mrs. Mitchell, we have a contract. The reception is in 3 weeks." "I understand your concern. Amanda and I apologize for any inconvenience. However, my financial circumstances have changed, and I can no longer fulfill this obligation. I suggest you contact Kevin immediately to arrange alternative payment." This is very unusual. We've never had a guarantor withdraw this close to an event. I imagine it is unusual, but sometimes unusual circumstances require unusual actions. After I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. That was one down, several to go. My next call was to Bella's florist. "Good morning, Maria. This is Margaret Mitchell." "Mrs. Mitchell, I was just working on the final arrangements for Kevin's wedding. They're going to be spectacular. I'm sure they would be beautiful, Maria, but I'm calling to let you know that I won't be able to pay for the floral arrangements after all." "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "I mean that due to unforeseen circumstances, I can no longer cover the cost of the wedding flowers. You'll need to work out payment arrangements directly with Kevin and Stephanie." "But Mrs. Mitchell, we have everything ordered. The flowers are being flown in specially. We've committed to suppliers based on your guarantee." "I understand this creates difficulties, and I truly apologize. But my situation has changed dramatically, and I simply cannot fulfill this financial commitment." "This is going to be a disaster. What am I supposed to tell your son?" "I suggest you call him immediately to discuss payment options." The photography call was the hardest because Sarah had been so sweet about Kevin's supposed thoughtfulness in having his mother pay for their wedding photos. "Sarah, this is Margaret Mitchell." "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so looking forward to capturing Kevin and Stephanie's special day." Actually, Sarah, that's why I'm calling. I need to let you know that I won't be able to cover the remaining balance for the photography services. Oh no, is everything all right? Kevin made it sound like this was so important to you. Let's just say that circumstances have changed significantly. You'll need to arrange payment directly with Kevin and Stephanie. But I've already invested so much time in planning their shots, and I've turned down other weddings for that date. I completely understand your position, and I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but I'm no longer in a position to pay for services for an event I won't be attending. You won't be attending, but it's your son's wedding. Yes, it is. You might want to ask Kevin about that when you call to discuss payment arrangements. Each phone call was becoming easier, and I found myself speaking with more confidence. This wasn't about revenge. This was about self-respect and teaching a lesson that was long overdue. My final call of the morning was to the catering company that was providing dinner for the reception. Premier Catering, this is David. David, this is Margaret Mitchell. I believe you're catering the Mitchell wedding reception at Hillcrest Country Club. Yes, Mrs. Mitchell. We're so excited about this event. Your son and his fiancée have excellent taste. I'm calling to inform you that I can no longer guarantee payment for the catering services. Excuse me. Due to changing family circumstances, I need to withdraw my financial responsibility for this event. You'll need to arrange payment directly with the couple. Mrs. Mitchell, we're talking about a reception for 150 people. The final payment is due in 1 week, and we've already ordered all the specialty ingredients. I understand the magnitude of what I'm saying, David, but sometimes we have to make difficult decisions based on changing circumstances. What am I supposed to tell your son when he calls? Tell him that his mother can no longer afford to pay for a party she's not invited to attend. After I hung up from that call, I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. It was done. Every vendor that had my name or credit attached to Kevin's wedding had been notified that I was withdrawing my financial support. I wasn't being vindictive or cruel. I was simply removing myself from a situation where I was being used and disrespected. If Kevin wanted a wedding without his mother present, then he could have a wedding without his mother's financial support. I spent the rest of a Thursday organizing my documentation copies of credit card statements showing the deposits I'd paid, records of my phone calls to the vendors, and a clear timeline of events leading up to Kevin's phone call on Tuesday night. By Thursday evening, I felt calmer than I had in days. I'd taken back control of my own life and my own finances. Whatever happened next was up to Kevin. He was about to learn that actions have consequences, and that the mother he'd taken for granted for 28 years was stronger than he'd ever imagined. I made myself a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and settled in to wait for the phone calls that I knew would be coming soon. Friday morning came and went quietly. I went to work at the diner, served my regular customers, and went about my normal routine. Part of me expected Kevin to call, but my phone remained silent. I wondered if the vendors had contacted him yet, or if he was still blissfully unaware of what was happening. Friday evening brought the first sign that my actions were having an impact. My phone rang at 7:30, and Kevin's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. I listened to the first voicemail around 9 o'clock. Mom, I just got a really weird call from the country club. They said something about payment arrangements changing. I'm sure it's just some kind of misunderstanding. Can you call me back, please? The second message was less calm. Mom, now the florist is calling me about payment issues. What's going on? Please call me back right away. By Saturday morning, I had 17 missed calls and 8 voicemails. The tone of Kevin's messages was evolving from confusion to panic. Mom, what did you do? The photographer says you canceled payment. The caterer is threatening to cancel our reception. You need to call me back right now and fix this. I was getting ready for work when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Kevin pacing on my front porch, his hair disheveled and his face red with stress. Stephanie was with him, looking perfectly put together, but clearly agitated. I opened the door and smiled calmly. Good morning, Kevin. Stephanie, this is a surprise. Mom, what the hell is going on? Kevin pushed past me into my living room with Stephanie following close behind. I'm not sure what you mean, sweetheart. Don't play dumb with me. Every vendor for our wedding is calling me demanding payment. They all say you backed out of some financial guarantee I never knew you made." I sat down in my favorite armchair and gestured for them to sit on the couch. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "I don't want coffee," Kevin was shouting now. "I want to know why you're trying to ruin my wedding." "Kevin, lower your voice. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm simply adjusting my financial commitments based on my current circumstances." Stephanie spoke for the first time since entering my home. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think there's been any misunderstanding at all, dear. Kevin made it very clear on Tuesday that there's no place for me at your wedding, so I decided there's no place for my money either." Kevin stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's not... You said you understood." "I do understand, Kevin. I understand that you think your mother's 28 years of sacrifice and support can be dismissed with a phone call. I understand that you believe I should pay for a wedding I'm not welcome to attend. I understand that you have more respect for a father who abandoned you than for a mother who never left your side." "Mom, it's not like that." "Then what is it like, Kevin? Explain to me how it makes sense that Harold gets a seat at your wedding table while I get a phone call telling me to stay home." Stephanie was whispering something in Kevin's ear, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She was beginning to realize that their perfect wedding was falling apart. "Look, maybe we can work something out," Kevin said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I hadn't heard since he was a child. "Maybe we can find you a seat after all?" "Find me a seat?" I laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Kevin, I'm your mother. I shouldn't need you to find me a seat at your wedding. I should have been the first person you thought of when you started planning this day. But Stephanie's family is so large and the venue has limitations." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Don't blame Stephanie's family for your choices. You made a decision about who was important enough to include in your wedding, and you made it very clear that I didn't make the cut." Stephanie finally spoke up again. "Mrs. Mitchell, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. This wedding has been so stressful, and there have been so many decisions to make." "Stephanie, let me ask you something. When you were planning this wedding, did you ever once suggest that Kevin's mother should be included?" She looked uncomfortable. "Well, space was really limited, and my parents felt strongly about having their friends there, and Kevin said you'd understand." "Kevin said I'd understand." I turned back to my son. "So this was your idea. You decided without even discussing it with Stephanie or her parents that your mother could be discarded." "That's not what happened." "Then tell me what happened, Kevin. Tell me the truth about how you decided I wasn't important enough to witness the most significant day of your life." Kevin looked at Stephanie, then back at me, his face crumbling. For a moment he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "I don't know," he whispered. Stephanie kept talking about how her parents wanted things to be perfect and how we needed to make good impressions, and somehow it just seemed easier to not have to worry about everyone getting along. "Easier," I repeated. "It was easier to exclude your mother than to stand up to your fiancé's parents." "Mom, I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "Yes, Kevin, you did. You made a terrible mistake, but not the one you think." I stood up and walked to my kitchen table, where I'd left the folder containing all my documentation from the past 2 days. "Your mistake wasn't just excluding me from your wedding. Your mistake was assuming that you could use me and disrespect me without consequences." I opened the folder and pulled out the credit card statements. "Did you know that you've charged over $8,000 to my credit cards for this wedding? The photography, the flowers, deposits for various services." Kevin's face went white. "Did you know that you listed me as the financial guarantor for your reception venue? That means I was going to be responsible for a $12,000 bill for a party I couldn't attend." "Mom, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. But here's what I want you to understand. I have spent 28 years putting your needs before my own. I have sacrificed my financial security, my social life, my romantic relationships, everything to make sure you had every opportunity to succeed." I pulled out my phone and showed them the list of missed calls. And this is how you repay that devotion: by lying to vendors about my involvement, by using my credit and my reputation to fund your wedding, and then by telling me I'm not welcome to attend. Stephanie was crying now, and Kevin looked like he might be sick. What do you want, Mom? What do I need to do to fix this? I sat back down and looked at my son, this young man I'd raised to be better than this. Kevin, I want you to understand something. Love without respect is worthless. For 28 years, I've loved you unconditionally. But I finally realized that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting unconditional disrespect. So what happens now? He asked quietly. Now you learn to solve your own problems. You have a wedding in 2 weeks with no venue, no flowers, no photographer, and no caterer. You figure out how to pay for it, or you postpone it until you can afford it. Mom, please, I'm begging you. Kevin, for the first time in your adult life, you're going to have to handle a crisis without your mother cleaning up your mess. Consider it a wedding gift. I walked to my front door and opened it. I think you both should leave now. I have to get ready for work. As they walked to their car, I heard Stephanie sobbing and Kevin trying to comfort her. I closed the door, leaned against it, and for the first time in days, I smiled a real smile. My son was about to learn what independence really meant. The next few days were surprisingly peaceful. My phone rang constantly, but I'd learned to screen my calls. Kevin called at least a dozen times each day, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Stephanie called twice, both times crying so hard I could barely understand her words. Even Harold called, demanding that I stop being vindictive and restore the wedding arrangements. That conversation with Harold was particularly satisfying. Margaret, what the hell do you think you're doing? Hello, Harold. I'm doing exactly what you did 22 years ago. I'm walking away from a situation that no longer serves my best interests. This is completely different. Kevin is your son. Yes, he is. He's also your son, Harold. So I suggest you step up and take some financial responsibility for his wedding. Isn't that what fathers do? I'm already paying for their honeymoon. How generous of you. A 1-week vacation compared to 28 years of daily support. I'm sure Kevin will remember which parent really came through for him. You're being ridiculous. No, Harold, I'm being realistic. For the first time in decades, I'm putting my own needs first. You should try it sometime. I hung up on him and immediately blocked his number. Janet, my sister, came over Wednesday evening with a bottle of wine and a worried expression. Margaret, everyone's talking about what happened with Kevin's wedding. Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Janet, let me ask you something. If your daughter planned a wedding and told you there wasn't room for you, but there was room for her father who'd never been there for her, how would you feel? Janet was quiet for a long moment. I'd be devastated. And if you found out you were secretly paying for that wedding while being excluded from it, I'd be furious. Then you understand exactly why I did what I did. We talked for hours that night, and by the time Janet left, she was completely supportive of my decision. She even offered to help me plan a vacation with the money I'd save by not funding Kevin's wedding. Thursday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Father Williams knocked on my door just as I was finishing my coffee. Margaret, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Of course not, Father. Please come in. I wanted you to know that I had a long conversation with Kevin yesterday. Oh. I told him that I couldn't perform his wedding ceremony unless he could demonstrate that he understood the values of honor and respect that marriage should be built on. I felt a rush of gratitude toward this man who'd been my spiritual advisor for so many years. What did he say? He cried, Margaret. He cried like I haven't seen a grown man cry in years. He told me he'd made the biggest mistake of his life and that he didn't know how to fix it. And what did you tell him? I told him that some mistakes require more than apologies to fix. They require a fundamental change in character and priorities. Father Williams stayed for another hour, and we talked about forgiveness consequences and the difference between enabling bad behavior and offering genuine support. When he left, he hugged me and said he was proud of me for standing up for myself. By the end of the week, the reality of the situation was becoming clear. Kevin's wedding was going to be postponed. Stephanie was having daily meltdowns, and I was sleeping better than I had in months. I wasn't happy about my son's pain, but I was finally at peace with my own decisions. For 28 years, I'd been teaching Kevin that he could take me for granted. It was time for him to learn a different lesson. 3 weeks later, on what would have been Kevin's wedding day, I was working in my small garden when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. I looked up to see Kevin walking toward me alone. He looked like he'd lost 20 pounds, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Kevin." He sat down on my porch steps, and I continued tending to my tomato plants. "The wedding's been postponed." I assumed it would be. Stephanie left me. I looked up at him, then seeing the pain in his face. Despite everything, he was still my son, and his hurt still affected me. "I'm sorry to hear that." She said she couldn't marry someone who would treat his own mother the way I treated you. I set down my gardening tools and sat on the steps beside him. "Kevin, what happened with Stephanie wasn't really about me. It was about who you chose to become in that relationship." "I know that now." He was quiet for a few minutes, and I waited for him to continue. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." I nodded. "I have been a terrible son, not just with the wedding, but for the past 2 years. I let Stephanie convince me that being a good husband meant putting distance between myself and my family. I let her make me feel ashamed of where I came from, of how hard you worked to raise me, of the sacrifices you made." His voice was shaking now. "I forgot that you were the one who drove me to baseball practice every day for 10 years. I forgot that you worked 2 jobs so I could go to college. I forgot that you never missed a birthday, a graduation, a moment that mattered to me. I let someone who'd known me for 2 years convince me that the woman who'd loved me for 28 years wasn't important enough to invite to my wedding." Tears were streaming down his face now. "And the worst part is, I used your love against you. I knew you'd always be there, so I thought I could treat you however I wanted and you'd just take it. I took advantage of the one person who never let me down." He turned to look at me directly. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to trust me again. But I need you to know that I understand what I did, and I understand why you did what you did. You didn't ruin my wedding. I ruined my relationship with my mother, and that was so much worse." I reached over and took his hand. "Kevin, do you understand why I couldn't just restore the wedding arrangements when you asked me to? Because it wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have just taught me that I could disrespect you and get away with it." "That's right. And do you understand why I had to let you handle the consequences on your own? Because I'm 28 years old, and it was time for me to learn that my actions affect other people." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over my small backyard. "Mom, is there any way we can start over? Can I earn back your trust?" "Kevin, my love for you never wavered, but my willingness to enable your poor choices had to end. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it has to be built on mutual respect, not just on my unconditional giving." "What does that look like?" "It looks like you calling me because you want to talk to me, not because you need something from me. It looks like you including me in your life because I matter to you, not because you feel obligated. It looks like you standing up for me when someone suggests I'm not important enough to be part of your life." "Can we start with dinner this Sunday? Just you and me like we used to do?" I squeezed his hand. "I'd like that very much." That Sunday dinner was the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. Kevin came alone, helped me cook, and we talked for hours about everything we'd both learned from this painful experience. Over the following months, Kevin worked hard to rebuild our relationship. He called regularly, visited often, and most importantly, he consistently demonstrated that he valued my presence in his life. He started therapy to understand how he'd allowed himself to become someone he didn't recognize, and he made amends with other people he'd hurt during his relationship with Stephanie. 8 months later, Kevin met Jennifer, a kindergarten teacher, who immediately embraced me as part of Kevin's life. When they got engaged a year later, the first person Kevin called was me. When they started planning their wedding, I was involved in every decision. At their small, beautiful ceremony, Kevin asked me to walk him down the aisle. As we walked together toward Jennifer and Father Williams, Kevin whispered, "Thank you for loving me enough to let me fall." The greatest gift I gave my son wasn't 28 years of sacrifice and support. The greatest gift I gave him was teaching him that love requires respect, that family relationships need boundaries, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. I learned something too, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that self-respect isn't selfish. It's necessary. Today, Kevin and Jennifer have been married for 3 years, and our family gatherings are filled with laughter, respect, and genuine love. Kevin often tells people that his mother taught him the most important lesson of his life by refusing to pay for a wedding she wasn't invited to attend. As I look back on that painful period, I realize that canceling Kevin's wedding was the best thing I ever did for both of us. It forced him to grow up and forced me to stand up. It ended a pattern of disrespect and began a relationship built on mutual love and appreciation. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means letting someone face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes love means believing in someone enough to know they can do better, even when they've forgotten how to try. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to teach someone you love an important lesson? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and the lessons we learn from life's most challenging moments. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries, even with the people we love most. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the people who truly love you will respect you, and the people who don't respect you don't deserve unlimited access to your heart or your wallet. Wishing you all the courage to stand up for yourselves and the wisdom to know when love requires tough choices.